My sister invited all her colleagues to my housewarming and told them I couldn't afford furniture. Is this Craigslist decor? They laughed. I pulled up the receipt, $18,000 custom set, paid in full. They went quiet real fast. I 30 female recently moved into my first home after my divorce, and to say it was a fresh start would be an understatement. I worked hard to furnish the place with quality pieces, $18,000 for a custom sofa and matching chairs. My sister 33 female came to my housewarming party with a few of her colleagues, and after seeing the furniture, she openly mocked it in front of everyone. Is this Craigslist decor? She said loud enough for everyone to hear. I pulled up the receipt, $18,000, paid in full, and showed it to her. Her smug smile disappeared faster than I thought possible. I'm still shocked by how quickly things escalated. I never thought much about what people thought of my home. I had always been content with what I had, living a pretty simple life. After my divorce from Ben, though, I wanted to create a space for myself that was more than just a house. I wanted it to feel like my own sanctuary. Ben had always been the one making the decisions about the house when we were together. The furniture was his idea, and my taste never really got a say. It wasn't until the divorce was final that I started making decisions for myself. This new place, a small 2-bedroom bungalow in Oak Creek, Colorado, was my escape, my fresh start. It wasn't the biggest or most expensive place, but I loved it. It was mine. After months of saving up, I was finally ready to furnish it, and I wasn't about to settle for the old, mismatched couches and bargain bin furniture that had filled my old home. I wanted quality. I wanted something that reflected who I was now, someone who had fought for a new beginning and had the strength to see it through. After months of browsing through catalogs and visiting furniture stores, I finally settled on a custom-made set. A sleek, contemporary sofa with matching chairs, made from high-end materials, something timeless and durable. Sure, it was expensive, $18,000, but I had the money saved up from my divorce settlement, and I paid for it in full. No loans, no debt. Just my hard-earned savings. When the furniture was delivered, I couldn't help but feel a little proud. The living room looked exactly how I wanted it to look, simple, yet elegant. Comfortable, yet stylish. It was a place where I could unwind and be myself. It was a reflection of who I was becoming, someone who no longer had to hide behind anyone else's expectations. I invited a few friends over for my housewarming party. Nothing big, just people who'd supported me during the divorce and the months of rebuilding that followed. And, of course, I invited Violet, my sister. Violet and I have always had a complicated relationship. We're not like the typical siblings who are inseparable. In fact, we've never been close. She's always been the golden child of the family, married to a wealthy man, living in a huge house with designer everything. She was always quick to point out that she had better taste than me, but I never really let it bother me. At least, not until that night. Violet arrived at my housewarming with a few of her colleagues. They all seemed perfectly nice, though I couldn't help but feel slightly out of place around them. Her friends were the kind of people who were always impeccably dressed, always had something to brag about, and somehow always made me feel like I wasn't quite on their level. The evening went fine at first. People were enjoying themselves, chatting, drinking wine, and complimenting me on the house. I was still riding high on the pride of finally having my own space, but deep down, I knew Violet was going to say something that would knock me down a peg. I'd been bracing for it. She had a way of making little digs, always in the name of joking or just being honest. But this time, she didn't even wait for the party to get started before making her move. She was standing near the front of the living room, talking to one of her colleagues, when she raised her voice just enough for everyone to hear. "So, Rachel," she said, a wicked grin spreading across her face, "I see you've decided to, decorate with Craigslist stuff? Is that what's in right now?" I didn't know the budget was that tight. Her colleague, a tall, sharply dressed man, snickered. Violet's words stung more than I expected. The room grew quiet, and I could feel all eyes on me, waiting for my reaction. I stood there for a moment, just staring at her. My mind raced. I didn't know if I wanted to laugh, cry, or scream. My sister always had this way of belittling me, of making me feel like I wasn't good enough. She would always talk about how her life was perfect, how her designer clothes, her perfect marriage, and her shiny SUV made her better than everyone else. The worst part was, our parents always seemed to agree with her. She was the star child, and I was just there. But that night? That night was different. I had spent months working hard to build a life I could be proud of. I had spent weeks finding the right furniture, paying for it with my own money, without any help from anyone. I was done being the butt of Violet's jokes. It wasn't just the furniture, it was the years of her treating me like I was beneath her. I wasn't going to let that slide anymore. I didn't react right away. I just stood there for a moment, trying to compose myself. Then, I walked over to the kitchen counter, grabbed the receipt for the furniture, and made my way back to where Violet was standing, her face still twisted into that mocking grin. "Violet, I think you're mistaken," I said, my voice calm but firm. "This wasn't from Craigslist." I pulled the receipt out of my pocket, held it up, and let the silence fill the room. Her grin faltered for a split second before she regained her composure. "It was custom-made," I continued, my heart pounding in my chest. $18,000. Paid in full. The room went completely silent. Violet's face went pale. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. The smirk had vanished completely, replaced by a look of genuine shock. The colleague she had been speaking to cleared his throat awkwardly, his earlier smirk now gone. The others in the room who had been awkwardly watching the exchange now shifted uncomfortably. I could feel their gazes on me, but this time it didn't bother me. For once, I wasn't shrinking. I wasn't apologizing for my choices. Violet didn't know what to say. She looked from the receipt to me and then to the other people in the room. It was obvious she wasn't prepared for this. The awkwardness hung in the air for a long moment, but no one spoke. Finally, Violet mumbled something about needing to leave. She turned quickly and walked toward the door, her colleagues in tow. I didn't try to stop her. I didn't need to. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I had control over the situation. I wasn't going to let her humiliation be my problem. It was hers to deal with. After they left, the room slowly filled with laughter again. My friends and colleagues came to me, reassuring me that I had done the right thing. I stood there for a while, absorbing everything. I had spent so long letting Violet's jabs slide, but in that moment, I had stood up for myself. And it felt damn good. I'm still processing everything that happened that night. Violet hasn't spoken to me since then. I've received a couple of passive-aggressive texts from her, but I've mostly ignored them. I don't need her in my life if she's only going to treat me like that. I'm finally learning how to be okay with myself. The furniture is more than just something I sit on now, it's a symbol of my independence, my strength. And every time I look at it, I'm reminded of that moment when I didn't let anyone, even family, tell me I wasn't good enough. As for Violet? I don't know what's next. But I do know one thing, I won't let her, or anyone else, tear me down again. The days following the housewarming were a strange mix of emotions. I spent a lot of time reflecting on what had happened, mostly because I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to it than just the incident with Violet. It wasn't just about the furniture. It was about something deeper, something that had been simmering for years. I think I'd always known that Violet and I were never truly close, but up until that point, I had always held on to the hope that things could change. That we could get along, or at the very least, respect each other. After the divorce, I was more open to the idea of rebuilding relationships, of giving people second chances. I wanted to believe that Violet, despite her flaws, might come around and understand that I was my own person now. But after the housewarming, that hope felt more and more naive. The next few days were quiet. Violet didn't reach out immediately, and I didn't feel any urge to contact her. It was like a strange, uncomfortable silence settled between us. The usual group texts from family members stopped coming, and I couldn't help but notice how much easier it was to breathe without the pressure of Violet's presence hanging over me. Then came the texts. They started out harmless enough. "Hope you're doing well after the party," one of them read. "Just wanted to check in and see how you're doing." But I knew better than to believe they were genuine. Violet didn't check in on me. Not like this. I didn't respond at first. Instead, I spent a few days thinking about whether or not I even wanted to address it. Did I really need to respond? I'd already shown her the receipt. I had already set my boundary. Did I owe her any further explanation? But then there was another text. This one was different. It was a little longer, a little more pointed. "Rachel, I've been thinking about the party, and I feel like you overreacted. I didn't mean to embarrass you, I was just joking around. You know, I didn't mean anything by it." I sat with the text for a while, turning it over in my mind. Just joking around. The word joking stung. She always did this, make a remark, then backpedal with "I was just kidding" when she saw the hurt it caused. She never took responsibility for her words. It was always about making the situation about my reaction rather than the impact of what she said. I took a deep breath and typed a response. "Violet, I don't think you understand how much that comment hurt me. It wasn't just about the furniture. It was about the way you've treated me for years. The constant need to make me feel small. I don't think you realize what it's like to always be the punchline of your jokes, and I'm not doing that anymore." I paused after hitting send. There was a part of me that felt relieved to say it, to finally let her know how her actions had made me feel over the years. But there was also a part of me that feared what her response would be. Would she try to make it right, or would she double down and dismiss my feelings yet again? The response came later that evening. "Fine. I guess if I'm such a problem in your life, I'll just leave you to it. Maybe I was wrong, but I'm not going to grovel for your approval." I blinked at the screen. It was what I expected, but it still stung. There was no apology, no recognition of how she had made me feel. Just more of the same, her way of making everything about her, turning it around to make me the bad guy for standing up for myself. I sat with the text for a long time, contemplating whether or not I should engage further. But something inside me clicked. This was it. I had done all the work of trying to salvage our relationship. I had bent over backward to keep the peace, to make things right, and yet, it was never enough for her. It wasn't just about the furniture anymore, it was about respect, boundaries, and realizing that maybe, after all these years, Violet was someone I couldn't change. So I didn't respond. A week passed, then another, and the silence between us grew. I didn't hear from Violet again, and I realized just how freeing that silence was. For the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for her approval, her validation, or her permission to be myself. And the more I sat with that feeling, the more I understood just how much I had been holding on to something that wasn't worth keeping. Work had been going well. My career had been something I'd focused on during the months after the divorce, and I had poured my energy into advancing in my role at a marketing agency. I had found new friends, people who didn't judge me, who didn't make me feel small or invisible. It was a refreshing change to be around people who saw me for who I was, not who they wanted me to be. One Saturday, about 2 weeks after the housewarming party, I was having lunch with a new friend, Sarah, a colleague from work who had become one of my closest confidants. We were sitting at a small cafe in downtown Denver, chatting about everything and nothing, when I got a message from Violet. It was short, almost too brief to be genuine, but the words still made my stomach drop. "I'm sorry." That was it. No explanation, no attempt to make amends. Just those 2 words. My immediate reaction was to feel nothing. For so long, I had been waiting for Violet to apologize, to admit that she had crossed a line. But when the apology finally came, it felt hollow. It wasn't the apology I needed, the one that acknowledged how she had hurt me. It was the kind of apology that someone offers when they've been forced to do it, when they know they've been caught but don't want to deal with the consequences. I showed Sarah the message, and she raised an eyebrow. What do you think? Are you going to respond? I didn't know how to answer at first. I had spent so many years chasing after her approval, trying to get her to see me, to care about me. But in that moment, I realized that Violet's apology wasn't the closure I needed. I didn't need her validation anymore. I had built a life for myself, and it didn't require her to be a part of it. I leaned back in my chair and looked out the window. I don't know if I'm ready to forgive her. I think I'm still angry. Sarah nodded. And that's okay. It's not about whether or not you forgive her, it's about whether or not you let her back into your life. You've got to protect your peace, Rachel. And sometimes, that means letting go. For the first time in years, I felt something stir within me. It wasn't anger, but a quiet strength, a realization that I didn't need to fight for something that wasn't meant to be. I didn't need to keep trying to make Violet understand. I had done enough of that. And now, it was time to move on. I didn't reply to Violet's message that day, and I didn't think about it much after. It wasn't about punishing her, it was about making space for myself. And as the days went by, the weight that had once felt so heavy lifted. As the days passed after Violet's brief, hollow apology, I found myself growing more comfortable with the silence between us. At first, I had been unsure, questioning whether I should respond or try to salvage the remnants of our relationship. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that the real change had already taken place. I was no longer dependent on Violet's approval, her validation, or her opinion to feel good about myself. For the first time in years, I was living life on my own terms. Still, there was a lingering feeling in the back of my mind, the feeling that Violet hadn't truly learned her lesson. That somehow, despite everything that had happened, she would find a way to weasel her way back into my life, to turn things around and make me feel like the small, insignificant sister again. I wasn't willing to let that happen. If I was going to keep my peace, I needed to take control of this situation once and for all. A few weeks later, my resolve was tested. It was a Saturday afternoon, and I was sitting on my new couch, $18,000 worth of beautiful, custom-made furniture, relaxing with a book and a cup of tea. The sun was filtering through the curtains, casting soft shadows across the room. I felt at peace, content with the life I was building. I had plans to go out with friends later that evening, but for the moment, everything felt right. Then, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Violet. Rachel, I know I haven't been the best sister. I've been thinking a lot about what happened at your housewarming and I realize I hurt you more than I ever intended. I've been a terrible person, and I'm truly sorry. Can we please talk? I want to make things right. I stared at the message, my fingers hovering over the screen. For a moment, I felt a rush of anger, then a wave of relief. She had finally come around, at least it seemed that way. But a small part of me couldn't shake the feeling that this was yet another manipulation, a way to regain control. I didn't want to be anyone's emotional punching bag anymore, and I wasn't sure whether I could trust her apology. But this time, it wasn't just about me. It wasn't about giving Violet the chance to redeem herself or letting her back into my life. It was about showing her that I no longer cared about the games she played or the power she thought she had over me. I took a deep breath, carefully typing my response. I'm not sure what you expect from me, Violet. You've hurt me over and over again, and I've spent so much of my life trying to get your approval. I've already made my peace with everything. I don't need you in my life if you're just going to treat me like an afterthought. There was a pause. Then, I saw her response pop up. Are you serious? After everything, you still won't give me a chance? I'm just trying to apologize here, and this is how you respond. Fine. But don't come crying to me when you realize you pushed away the one person who actually cares about you. That was it. I knew in that moment that Violet wasn't sincere. This wasn't about genuine change or reconciliation. This was about her ego, her inability to take responsibility for her actions and acknowledge how much damage she had done. I felt no more need to engage. But I wasn't done. I wasn't going to let her think she could just walk away without consequences. Not after everything she had put me through. The next day, I decided to do something bold. Something that would leave a lasting impression. I knew that Violet had always been the type to flaunt her wealth, her designer clothes, her extravagant lifestyle. She was the queen of social media, always posting about her latest shopping spree or her perfect family vacations. It was how she defined herself, how she validated her self-worth. It wasn't just about having things, it was about proving to everyone else that she had the best of everything. So, I did something she wasn't expecting. I posted a picture of my living room on Instagram. It was nothing fancy, just a well-lit shot of the custom-made sofa and chairs, the soft lighting casting a warm glow over the room. In the caption, I simply wrote, $18,000 well spent. Every piece was chosen with care, and it's a reminder that I've come a long way since the beginning of this journey. Hashtag new beginnings, hashtag no more games, hashtag living on my own terms. It wasn't just a brag. It was a statement. A few hours later, I saw that Violet had unfollowed me on Instagram. I wasn't surprised, but a small part of me felt vindicated. She couldn't stand seeing me succeed. She couldn't handle that I had something she couldn't control. But I wasn't done yet. I had another idea, one that would make sure she knew exactly what she had lost. Violet was always the center of attention in our family, always making sure everyone knew how perfect her life was. But I knew that deep down, she was insecure. Her need to put me down, to belittle me, was just her way of masking her own fears. So, I decided to take a bold step. I reached out to our parents, something I had been hesitant to do in the past. It was time to have an honest conversation with them. I wanted them to understand how their favoritism toward Violet had impacted me, how their constant comparison between us had hurt me for years. I didn't expect them to change overnight, but I needed them to hear me. I didn't go into it with the intention of starting a family war, but I wanted them to know how much I had struggled with their favoritism. I wanted them to understand that I wasn't the one who had to be fixed, it was Violet who had been toxic all along. My conversation with them was honest, raw, and emotional. It was the first time I had ever opened up to them in such a direct way. When I was finished, they sat in silence for a while. My mother was the first to speak, her voice soft. I had no idea, Rachel. I'm so sorry. We've always been proud of Violet, but I see now how much that affected you. It wasn't perfect, and I wasn't looking for an apology from them. But it felt good to have my feelings acknowledged. I wasn't invisible anymore. Over the next few weeks, I continued to build my life, piece by piece. I invested in things that made me happy, things that reflected who I had become. I was no longer waiting for validation from Violet, from my parents, or anyone else. I had learned that my worth wasn't tied to what anyone else thought of me. And Violet? She never reached out again. Her silence was deafening, but it was also the final sign that I had made the right decision. The door to our relationship had closed, and she had closed it herself. I knew, deep down, that I would never go back to being the person I was when I allowed her to dominate my life. But what was most satisfying wasn't the absence of Violet in my life. It wasn't the petty revenge of the Instagram post or the conversation with our parents. It was the peace I had found within myself. I had taken control of my life, and in doing so, I had learned that sometimes, the best revenge is simply living well and refusing to let anyone else dictate your worth. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was thriving.